Hi, everyone. Today's May 9th, 2021. It's been 5 months since our last interview with Jerry. I can't believe it. Hi,
Unbelievable.
Jerry.
Go ahead.
All right, here we go. So when we ended our last interview in December, we were talking a little bit about Alan, and you were telling a bit about him and all that. Could you talk to us about, maybe some stories about him and what he was like and all that?
Hang on.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Um, well, he was very young. I mean, he was 2 months old when his mother died, so he has no recollection in that regard. Um, he was a very active young boy. He liked to dance, so
Huh.
as he got older, he danced a lot. Um, he was convinced that Dad didn't know how to run the business.
Uh,
And it turned out that maybe he didn't know how to run the business either.
right.
Had chances, but frankly, they took money out of the business rather than taking money and keeping it there and building it up. He was generous, but I think I may have told you he was generous with my money, but that's okay. It's
Yeah.
long gone.
Yeah.
He he would call me fairly often.
Yeah.
So would my father call me fairly often.
Yeah.
And that was very good. It was good for me. It was good for them.
Yeah.
Um, as far, I don't really have many stories. Maybe if you would, asked me to be prepared for something like that, I might have, recollected something in particular.
Did he,
But
do you remember, did he play a lot of sports? Do you remember?
um, I'm trying to think. No, I don't think he played many sports. He didn't play tennis or golf.
Yeah.
And those are the sports of an older person.
Yeah.
Um, but he was into sports in terms of, having fans and going to, for instance, um, several times the Super Bowl was held in Miami.
Yeah.
And somehow, despite having no money or not much, he went to the games.
Yeah.
You know, he went down to Miami, got tickets, etc.
Yeah.
So he had interests. He read, um, not much. Maybe as we talk, some recollection will
Yeah.
come through.
Of course. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
If you think of things, just please tell me. Okay. So I want to get back to the book a bit. I have a few more questions to ask you. Um,
sure.
so here's maybe a tough one, but um, so you talk about towards the end of the book, you talk about Louis really didn't sit down with you to talk about your mother. Um, do you think
Right.
that did he really have to sacrifice memories for the sake of this new family? That's something you had written. What's your feeling on that?
I don't think he should have, obviously. Um, you know, he was an adult. I was a child. Why wouldn't he um, impart, some stories about my mother? Um, you know, uh, I think he made a mistake in life. He wanted to have a new family and make sure that Norman and Alan and I were, well brought up, this, that. Um, and he found Bella, and in one vein, that happened, you know. Uh, excuse me. But that doesn't mean he should have I mean, he got married for 15 years or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And 15 years, you know, much as you asked me the question about Alan, he could have at some point decided that I was old enough and he wanted to talk about her love of books and seemingly my love of books, or a variety of things of which I'm not aware, I'm not aware of. In those days, you got married after a courtship. You didn't get married within 3 months or 8 months or something. You got married in 3 years. And I think that that alone would provide stories, right?
Yeah.
You know, courtship, we did this, we did that, we went there, or, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. So that was disappointing for me. I would have liked to have shared in those memories, and he decided he didn't want to.
Do you think, you know, given that time, that it was just too much for him? You know, he wanted to be a strong man, and so he just didn't say anything? Or do you have any ideas about that?
Well, I think the one thing which I just talked about is he wanted to have a family. He wanted to make sure his 3 kids, you know, were brought up. The alternative of, you know, he might have married someone else, but the alternative of not marrying with a 2-month-old or so, and Norman at, you know, very young, I even younger, he wanted to make sure that we were safe. Like if anything happened to him, he didn't want us to go to, you know, a state, you know, whatever it is, where we would probably go. I mean, I don't know if we had relatives who would take us in. Maybe they would take 1 person in, but to take 3 in would be a tough thing, I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So he decided. Occasionally, he could have stepped in.
Yeah.
When Bella went a little bananas, but he didn't.
Yeah.
And I think that was his compromise, if you will.
Yeah. Well, you kind of wonder what, you know, his parents' relationship was, and who knows, right? I mean,
yeah, that's right. That's a good point. Certainly, his father was not giving,
yeah.
you know, and all. And I don't know much about his mother. You know, it's again a story where I know more about his grandmother, who I think in prior conversations was a trader, Trader.
Yeah.
And on Saturdays and Sundays, not Saturday, they would be religious. On Sunday, she would go to the markets, sell some stuff and buy some stuff.
Yeah.
And she would take him, she would, you know, and I'm trying to think, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Certainly I remember her as a giving person, but, you know, that doesn't mean anything relative to Louis or,
Yeah.
and all. And, you know, he came over at 17, and I don't think he ever wrote her. And I don't think he ever went back, you know, for
No.
a visit.
Yeah.
On the other hand, and that's equally true of Miriam, she didn't go back to Europe. Maybe that was maybe that was what it was all about. You cut ties, and, you know, and maybe more money than you can afford. Who knows?
Yeah.
but, you know, she did live with her aunt, Saul Greenbaum's mother, and so she had a home. Louis had to work, you know, to establish a home and marry and have children. But I think Miriam was lucky to the extent they helped bring her over, as I said in prior meetings. And she went and finished high school. In those days, finishing high school was a big deal. You know, and today it's a lesser feat. But to having a high school education was meaningful. It established you as an educated person.
Probably especially for a woman, I would think.
That's right. Of course, Saul, who I miss deadly,
yeah.
He not only, you know, graduated high school, he graduated college and became an accountant.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal. And he had to be certified. You know, his father had money, as we talked about, I believe. So Saul was educated. His two sisters were not, but Saul certainly was. And
you know, it seems, you know, from knowing you, you know, my life during my life, you know, you and Sheila parent and grandparent. I mean, you know, obviously very differently. Times change, and you know, the fact that you're so connected with your kids and your grandkids, and you go and visit, it's a really different kind of way of parenting, I think.
Well, accepting that in those days, people lived near each other.
Yeah.
And to the extent that, you know, I'm thinking back when we lived in Loring Place. Well, a block away was another street. And, you know, my aunt lived there. And another block away was her daughter and all. So to that extent, we followed the immigrant, you know, clustering and all. But my father really didn't have a relationship with his father. His father just didn't help, didn't offer him any sort of help.
Yeah.
And I can only remember one visit when he came over to our apartment, and immediately we played cards. That was him and that was me. I liked playing cards. He remarried after my mother died. And I remember her, you know, the equivalent of grandmother. She did, it's funny, she lived in the Lower East Side. And we once or twice went to visit her. Her name was Tanta Rosie, and Tanta's aunt, an older woman by that time, but then so was my grandfather at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I didn't have a real relationship. So to that extent, Louis did not have, you know, much in the way of relatives. He had a lot of friends, Lunsmen. Yeah. And Lunsmen, you know, stuck together. They were friends in Europe, and you know, and they were friends in the United States, very close.
Yeah.
They would visit each other frequently.
Yeah. And that became his family.
Well, yes. That became, you know, who he probably talked to about things, you know, and they were his buddies.
Yeah.
And there were about 4 of them that were very close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not, you know, on some level, it's not that different from you and Joe and Cooperman, right? I mean,
Right.
Saul was a
Yeah.
relative, but still, he was a friend, you know?
Well, that's true. Um, um, they were relatives and they were friends, you know.
Yeah.
And they were, as I said just a moment ago, they were his buddies. They might in the summer go up to the Catskills together. Um, they all belonged to this um, organization of people who came from their town. So they, you know, the Smithsonian was the name of the town. I mentioned it earlier. Um, you know, they grew up there. You know, there is something about, for a period of time, I think Dad was put into a home. He never, ever mentioned that to me. So there's a hole in his story. I think he was very young. And when I would ask, I ask him, no comments. So possibly my grandfather was in the United States. Something may have happened with my grandmother and he had to be, institutionalized. I don't mean it in any sense of the mind. I mean survival, if he was a young age.
Sorry, that was Louis or your grandfather?
Oh no, Louis.
Louis, what? Well, he went through depression, didn't he?
Pardon?
Was that when he was very depressed, you mean?
No, I think this was when he was 5 to 8.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I didn't know it either, and he never discussed it. But I think that's where he met 3 or 4 of these friends who became friends for life.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Huh. Mysteries. We'll never find out.
Mystery, right. Right.
I wanna turn away from the family for a bit.
Sure.
I want to hear about, look, you and Sheila are real New Yorkers. September 11th. What are your memories of September 11th and that day?
You mean that day?
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah.
I was away, I think in
Right.
Israel.
Yes, that's right.
I was away in Israel. Sheila was was not in the city. I was, so I was watching 9/11 on the TV and first seeing the first building and then the second building collapse. And, I remember vividly one of the Israelis saying, how many people could be in that building? And of course, I'm trying to think, I used to go to that building for transportation or whatever, the buildings. And I would say to them, I think there could be 40,000 people in the building. Now, as it turned out, for whatever reason, most of the people were evacuated. And so, 2,900 people died.
Yeah.
But I was stunned. I mean, how could this happen? How could we, we have such great armed forces. We have theoretically, the FBI and the CIA, and there's 15 other intelligence forces. How could that happen? But mostly it was a stunned feeling of how, what in heck is happening? How can this be?
Yeah.
And then there was immediately my fight to get home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like Sheila was with the kids. People were going north, so there was traffic, but going north thinking it was safer.
Yeah.
Then, and if the buildings come down, what prevents one building from knocking the next one down?
Yeah.
All of these skyscrapers could easily have generated a domino effect. And then I told you the story about them we were on this mission, a peace, not a peace mission, but a mission that I discuss in the book.
Yeah.
But then it was the Jewish organization wanted UJA wanted to get us back to show that they had protected us and we weren't and no one in that group got hurt, and we got to the airport, as I mentioned, and we were afraid that there were rumors that we wouldn't leave that day, and then we wouldn't leave for a week, and we would fly to Canada. But as it turned out, they got us on a plane, and we got home, and that was to their credit. There was a number of people, and everyone was worried about their family. There were all kinds of rumors, all kinds of, would we land? Who knew? One of the things was there going to be another plane that would be destroyed? Why stop with two? The perpetrators might have lined up 8. And maybe there was nuclear problems. Huh?
Yeah.
Who the heck knew the extent of the problem?
Yeah.
As it turned out, there were just 2 planes.
Yeah.
Well,
there were, I think, wasn't there one more in Pennsylvania too?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania one, they just suicide.
Pentagon.
Also.
Yeah, it was terrible. Okay.
Yeah. Where were you?
Sorry?
Where were you?
I was in Connecticut. I was in a meeting, a United Way meeting. And I remember that. I know
you weren't that far away. I mean, theoretically, you might have spent time in New York and gone up to Connecticut. Who knows? But and all kinds of stories.
Yeah.
That I relay and don't have to rehash. But there were people who helped other people.
Yeah.
And there were people who didn't help other people.
Right. That's right.
That's life. I mean,
right.
I don't think, you can't say more than that.
I want to ask you some questions about Israel. You've been to Israel many times. You're very supportive. I want to take you back. I want to take you back to one trip, which is in 2001. I don't know if you remember, but an Orthodox Jew from Brooklyn called an Israeli soldier a traitor. And in the book, you talk about getting very, very upset. Do you have any memory of that at all?
At first, when you said that, I had absolutely no memory.
Yeah.
There again, let me think about it. But it was something to do with people calling people who were carrying either some sort of banners or something, and the guy was, right now Israel is basically conservative right wing, in a similar pattern to the United States, which is, split in half and all. And but the thing about Israel, and I don't know if I've said these stories, but one story is neither is a story. The head of Hezbollah did a trial to see how Israel would react if they mixed civilians and armored, and the army in Hezbollah was attacking them, and Israel mixed. There were civilians and, as I say, and army. And he wanted to see if they wouldn't stop fighting and evacuate the civilians. And that's not what happened. The Israelis bombed civilians and military to make sure that the border was safe and not invaded. And the head of Hezbollah said, I learned a lesson. He said, they'll do anything to protect their country. I thought it was an interesting story. And the other story that I thought very interesting is we're American Jews and we want to support Israel. But A, Israel might come first. And B, when the Israelis, when they wake up in the morning, are Israelis.
Yeah.
When we wake up in the morning, we're Jews. And there's a difference between being Jews and Israelis.
Yeah.
The Israelis are a country and they will do anything to protect their country. Whereas we as Jews, we might give money, we might help, but it's a different relationship. And I don't think a lot of Jews recognize, sometimes the government does something that seemingly is anti-Israeli. Jews get angry. The Israelis put it within the context of they'll continue to do things to protect their country.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important distinction between us and the Israelis.
Yeah. Well, we're also Americans, aren't we?
First and foremost, we're Americans.
Yeah. So that's that. You talk about you use the word Hazak. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Hazak, in your book.
Yeah.
So are you Hazak, Jerry?
What does it mean?
Hazak means, let's see here, hold on for 1 second.
In line with what I just said, 3 minutes ago.
Yeah.
The Israelis do live with Hazak.
Hazak.
Meaning, don't give up. We're not going anywhere. This is our country, and they use the expression Hazak. I just finished reading a book by two left-wingers in Israel, and wrote a book about Palestine and problem with negotiations. In their eyes, and they gave many illustrations. The Palestinians won't give, the name of the book is The War of the Rare. And what it really says is the Palestinians might give in terms of water rights or trading or fishing rights or what have it. But they can't give up giving back the land to the Palestinians. And the Palestinians really, are saying, we have 6 million Palestinians. What the real number is, that's not it. It's much less. But what the Palestinians are saying is we have the right to go back to Palestine and take over that part of the country. And the Israelis are saying there's no country on earth that will give back, all of this land. So the Israelis, there's no negotiation.
Yeah.
If the terms of the Palestinians are 6 million Palestinians can come back into Israel.
Yeah.
There's no room for negotiation. It doesn't matter what the water rights are. See, and again, I think most Jews don't quite understand that the Palestinians won't give in to that situation, and the Israelis will never give in to that
Yeah.
situation.
Of course.
So you can see I'm interested in Israel,
Yeah.
and it's very important to me. But America comes first. But Israel has to have the freedom to do what they have to do. Yeah. And I don't know what they would do, but the fantasy is, they're going to be in a fight, and they might lose. So they've got to protect themselves and be Hamas.
Yeah, no, that's right. I'm going to turn you to DDC. There was an ethos of market research. There was a case you mentioned, M versus BP, where you took a strong stand and didn't turn over information. Talk about how ethics have guided your life.
Well, you would like to think that you're ethical and that you care about other people and that you'll help other people. And to some degree, I think that's what we imparted to our kids. But how did you put it? Let me get it exactly.
Talk about your ethics. I mean, how have ethics, kind of guided your life, and also, DDC as well.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm fair.
Hi, Michael.
Keep going. Go ahead.
No, I think, given ethical situations, that I would opt for doing what I thought was right rather than what I thought I had to do. And I think that stayed with me all my life. Is it related to my mother? I've never even thought of the relationship, if you will. But what it is all about is being honest and fair and straight and given the situations, opting for what was right, even at my expense. And I think that's the last few words of the point. It may be at your expense, but you have to do it.
Yeah.
Because that's the way, I'm not going to say that's the way my father brought me up, because I don't think that's true, or my mother. And I don't know if Miriam opted in that way.
I wanted to ask you, I know that there was some fraudulent stuff that happened at, Utensco. Do you remember that? And do you remember, how did you feel when that was going on? Do you remember at all?
I have to go through the book again. I am missing it. What was it? Give me a little specific.
This was not in the book. This was about, I think there was a fire or something. And maybe it was fraudulent and some money was taken, insurance money.
Yeah. I think Joe and I have to give him credit, it isn't only myself, we were straight.
Yeah.
And maybe there weren't any circumstances where we could have not been straight. But I think that in the case of Alan and Louis, they weren't. And it's a shame because it doesn't make or break the situation. In other words, if in fact you did something you shouldn't have done, your life continues. It doesn't make you retire. It doesn't make you extraordinarily wealthy or extraordinarily have an advantage, which translates into money. In other words, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
What's worth it is to be straight.
Yeah.
And to be as straight as you can be. And, I think that's how I, you know, maybe in tennis cheating. No, I'm only changing, changing the score. No, it's 40-30. I didn't cheat tennis either.
No.
But if you're asking, were we ethical? Yeah, I think we were. I don't think, as I said, it's not worth it. It's not worth being a cheat.
Yeah.
It's not that much the difference. So you might as well be straight. Okay.
I want you to talk a little bit. I know you had some cancer, but also talk about, I want you to talk a little bit more about Alan and maybe how you came to know him a bit better and his fight as well.
Yeah. Well, in terms of myself, I had prostate cancer, but it was discovered very early.
Yeah.
I went to Sloan Kettering, which was or is, outstanding. And luckily it was caught in time and all. And in terms of, it reached a point, they operated, and they gave me whatever they did. But at some point, I had to go to a Sloan Kettering every week, and I did it myself. And I was in good shape, and it passed. And it's now been, I don't know, 15, 16, 18 years, and hasn't recurred. So within that context, that's great. In terms of Alan, I do think as he got sicker, we got closer. And I think even before that, we did. Rose tells me, his wife, that we became very close. And I can't pin that down. But she said that he loved me and he very much admired me. And those are good words to hear. And towards the end, we got closer, and I visited him frequently and all of that. And I think he calmed down for the most part. He wasn't as anxious. No, he wasn't as much, too much. He just was,
Did he become more accepting, do you think?
More accepting?
Yeah.
Of what?
I don't know, just of his own mortality.
Was I more accepting? Yeah, I think so. You don't want to lose people.
Yeah.
You don't want to, in a sense, be in a situation where it's family and it's close, and and you would sacrifice. And I gave him a lot of money.
Yeah.
But it wasn't important.
Yeah.
But we were more and more friendly.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose.
Yeah.
You don't want to lose. And it meant his wife was going to be alone and his 2 children. And I think I think they've grown up and done well. Howard was in a bad situation that Alan left him, and Howard did very well coming back, paying off all the debtors and starting. He just made a mention of himself. And Michelle was the head of the bar for the state of Florida. That's an accomplishment. And I saw her on TV the other day on some matter, it doesn't matter. And her two daughters are in show business, and one is doing extremely well. So he would, you know, I wish he would have had the nachas, a Yiddish word meaning the pleasure of seeing his kids prosper, you know, and all.
His three younger grandchildren, you know, who, yeah.
His three younger children, what?
His three younger grandchildren, you know, who are still going through school and all that.
Well, one just graduated, started college.
Yeah.
And he's very bright. I don't know, you know, what will be. The other two are seemingly okay, but who knows? I mean, that's the future. And you know, I think one is 12 and one is 15 and one is, let's say, 17.
17 or 18, yeah.
Yeah, so, but you don't know where they're going in the long run.
I think it's very true. I think you make a really good point in that, you know, Alan obviously doesn't get to share in their lives, but they don't get to share in his life either.
Right.
You know, and it just goes through time, right? I mean, with Louis, right? Louis' parents, Miriam's parents never really, you know, got to know any of us at all, you know.
Yeah. Right. And, you know, think in terms of what your kids would have missed if you weren't around, or, you know, or if they spent time with Norman, but not with whatever with it means. And who, you know, you can't predict. Those are the things you can't predict.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows? But, you know, I think you've come to terms with Danny, and that's hard. I give you a lot of credit for that, because, you know, you might have wanted one way or another to pull him out. You're very tolerant, and you're terrific with Sarah.
Yeah, thank you.
Those are admirable things, you know. And
it's, you know, when we, thank you. When, you know, when we began this discussion, you know, it is, if you look, I mean, at families throughout time, it is very much an evolution, right? I mean,
right.
You know, think about your parenting, and then think about how your children, you know, parents their kids. You know, you compare that to maybe what Louis and his parents, you know, it's very different. You know, it's very different.
Well, it's really true, but it was a different society as well, you know, and they were immigrants. We were the first ones to go to college.
Yeah.
But it was unheard of.
Yeah.
You know, so if you take that, you know, there were jobs. Hey, Louis, you know, was able to start a business and run it for 50 years.
Yeah, that's right.
That's admirable.
Yeah.
You know, and he lost a wife, and he had a tough situation, and he somehow came through with the 3 kids, you know, and he was quick to, as I told you, to criticize me if I was boasting or I was bragging or anything like that. He would try to put me down, you know? So he was in his ways. The other day I was thinking about him and thinking, you know, about some of our relationships and all. We also became a little closer as we all aged, and that was good too. That was good too.
I have a few more questions to ask you.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So we're getting towards the end of the book, but towards the end, you state, and I quote, "After I promised myself that I would make an effort to change elements of my character, I
Yeah.
have I have changed, but at best only slightly." So you're going to be 86 this week. You've learned and experienced a lot, but how have you changed? And what kinds of things would you like to continue to change?
Boy.
Tough question.
Well, I think I'm more tolerant of situations. I feel like I want to help. I want to help my kids. You could say they have to do it on their own and all. And I think that's true, but I would like to help them regardless. I thought about a somewhat similar question and thought, could I have done more? Could I have built the business more?
Yeah.
Rather than make sure it was safe and be conservative and make sure my kids inherit money. And so I think I could have done more in a business sense. And I'm friendly with several political people, assemblymen and the like, council. Could have I done anything in that area? You see, I'm glib enough, and I could have attended meetings, political meetings, and maybe there would have been a gap where I would have fit in. But I would have liked to have played a better game of tennis. It's a joke. But so, you ask yourself, could you have done more? Could I have made more money? Could I have helped friends? I certainly know I helped a lot of the family in a lot of financial ways. And I thought Alan couldn't handle money, and he should have been able to.
Yeah.
Not to pay me back as much as to make his life better.
Yeah.
He didn't do it well. Yeah. He could have.
Yeah.
And I have the feeling it was, I didn't discuss financials with Louis, but I have the feeling it was the same with him, that they were similar in not taking advantage of what they might have.
Yeah.
We didn't do all of those things, but we did well enough to do those things. You know what I mean? We did build up the business.
Yeah.
We were first in a number of places. We proved ourselves in business in a variety of ways. We didn't grow if I were operating in today's climate, I think we would have done even better.
Yeah.
But who knows? That's just a feeling. That's not a reality statement. I think I was lucky. My wife was extraordinarily loyal and helpful, and I had a partner who was similar. We worked together. And so he was a good partner to have. He was solid, he was strong, he was helpful, he was daring. He did things that make something a success. We were venturesome. We did a lot of things that others didn't do, and it provided us with not only a good living, but a satisfaction with what we built. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
well, I want to know I want to know more about how do you feel that you've changed? How have you changed personally? Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I've found you to soften over time, to be much more approachable. I've seen that in your character. But what are the
Right.
things that you think have changed in your life?
Well, I mean, as I said, we could have been more daring, but I'm not sure how to answer that. I think I've answered it, but um, I think I made a mistake in not pushing Louis to tell me about Miriam.
Hmm.
See, I mean, we're not talking of a 5-year-old. You know, he lived, and I was already an adult. Why didn't I pursue it rather than him? You know, I said he owed it to us to talk about her, but I owed it to myself, you know, to talk at that time about to my cousin Saul, to some relatives who knew her. I, I think I was both conservative and daring, and that was a good thing to be. I took chances. Uh, I, you know, was in a number of political and social situations where I excelled or where I, you know, was a leader. Um, but on the other hand, another part of me was conservative. I wanted to play it safe. So I was both. I played it safe and I took my chances. And, you know, you can't do it all or be it all or succeed at all. Um, you know, you have to, there's a balance. Uh, you know, envious of some people who succeeded and not envious at all. I sleep at night. You know what I mean? Um, I fought. And, you know, I was glad that I supported Israel. I'm glad I went on a dig. It was a good experience of, you know, of coming out of it, uh, knowing that I helped organize it and make it what it was and found what we did, which I described earlier. So I did some interesting things and helped some people.
I always, whenever I come to see you, it's been a while, but I admire that black and white picture you have to the left of you there.
Oh,
I love
yeah.
that picture. Looks like Jerry is a strong guy out there.
Well, you know, it was a funny thing. Um, most most of us are sedentary. You know, we don't. You know, maybe Andrew rides a bike and Mark works out, but as I look at the picture, I'm in our uh, office, and there's a picture of me, and I looked at it this morning, and here I am, all muscular, and it was a terrific experience. I really, really pounded the earth
Yeah.
with a pick and a shovel, and I enjoyed it to the hilt,
And
you know,
it was very hot, wasn't it?
extremely hot.
Yeah.
You could not work past a certain time. I mean, you were, and water was, as I mentioned, you had to, was mandatory. Yeah, we stopped by noon, and you know we had a break at 10, and maybe an informal break earlier. You really, really was hot. It's like saying was the Himalayas high. Yes,
Yeah.
this was real work, and 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 I, you know, and I handled the college students who were screwing around, and so the professors, you know, came to me for help because of my managerial experience. And I found some stuff. And, and one piece is in the Jewish Museum. And if I ever get to Israel again, I'm going to go see it again.
There you go.
Which gave me a lot of pleasure.
Great.
And, I worry about Israel. That's,
yeah, of course.
That's a real thing.
We all do.
Yeah.
So in your book, you have this fantasy about, your mom comes back, Miriam, and hugs you.
Yeah.
And I found it very touching to read.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you would add to that fantasy? Anything that you would change in that fantasy?
Well, of course, I would update her on the grandchildren, on first the children, grandchildren, that it was a rough period. She passed away, but they grew, they matured, they're good people, and she should be proud and not, worrisome about them. And then I would talk to her about Sheila and the pleasure, that I earned and she delivered. So, and then I would talk about Louis and tell her he had a tough decision to make and he made one, that you might not have made or I might not have made, but that he made.
Yeah.
And I would say to her, all of these things are relative to her. But I would say to her, I missed her. And I would have loved to have spent time with her and to have enjoyed her company. And my feeling is I would have liked her.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now I'm starting to cry. I think I would have liked her.
I think so.
She was a book reader, and so am I.
Yeah.
And I would have enjoyed sharing that experience.
Yeah. Of course. Of course. We touched on this a little bit. You grew to love your dad again. You talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about that. What kinds of things would you say to him, if he came back?
Well, I think really what the makings of that was that he changed, not me, he changed. He became more open, more considerate. He called his grandchildren, his children, literally every day, as you may be proof of.
Yeah, yeah.
And he talked to them. He gave them advice. He said, no, don't do that, or I think you can do that, or I think you need to do that. And they appreciated it. It wasn't a question of a one-way street. It was a question of he cared about them. And he called me every day too.
Yeah.
And I immediately knew he was on the phone. But he called them and they knew he cared. And it gave me pleasure in knowing that they had a grandfather who cared.
Yeah.
Not every grandfather cares or is active or involved or whatever. And so knowing that, and then we just talked, he and I, and occasionally I would talk to him about business or money, but my thing with business and money was mine. Maybe I talked to Joe.
Yeah.
But not, and of course, if we were going to buy a house, I would talk to Sheila.
Right.
And we would decide what to do. But she had a tough life too. Her father died young.
Yeah.
Her mother was a single mother, 2 children. She had to raise them. She had to,
Well,
it was tough.
I thought, I mean, both of your lives are, I mean, your childhoods are very similar, and I thought very interesting that the two of you should,
Yeah,
hook up together.
you make a good point. I've thought of that. Um, her mother, I thought was admirable in that, she was able to raise the kids and pay for things and all of that. It was a hard life,
Yeah.
It was nothing, he died young. Sheila was 12, Judy was 4.
Yeah.
It was a tough life, but
Yeah.
I got through it and kept getting better at what she did.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Who have been your heroes, either living or not living?
say that again.
Who have been your heroes? Who are people that learned a lot from in this life?
Well, I think, aside from Sheila and Joe and Saul, um, I had a stepbrother who I thought was very square and who I talked to you about. He he just was honest, and boy would he go after me if he thought I was faking anything or whatever. And he had a terrific wife as well. But I don't know who. I didn't have a mentor, if that's what you mean. Um, Lenny was out on the coast, and we only talked occasionally. Saul just was a guy who cared and who gave good advice, and not only on business but on life. He just was a good guy, and I miss him a lot. But then there were, we had friends. Bob Koopman was a good guy to talk to. And you know, you make friendships, and it turns out that some of them are meaningful, and you can share things with, or they can share with you. But I think I would keep my counsel. I know that several people have described me as a guy who doesn't talk. That's not true in all, but I would think about problems, I still do at night, mostly in bed, try and consider situations. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm way off.
Yeah. I have one more question to ask you.
Okay.
So this will be a little tough, but at the end of the book, you talk about a world without Jerry Rosenkranz. And I'm wondering if you realize the impact that you've made on so many people and, the number of people that really love you. Saying all that, how do you want to be remembered by people?
It's a tough question because, did I play well? Did I care for my children? Did I do the right things? I mean, all of those things. You want to be remembered as a person who cared about the family, who would help the family and friends. I guess I want to be remembered as somebody who you might like, who you might want to be friendly with, who you knew you could depend on in given situations, who, you know, cared for his wife, cared for his kids, cared for the world. I'd like to be remembered as a person who, you know, cared for the America and wanted to make sure that it survived and all. I don't know what else. It's, you know, I don't want to be remembered as, you know, a fast runner. I want to be remembered as, you know, I would run and people would be appreciative of knowing me. That's about it. I'd like to be remembered as a person who, as I said a moment ago, who cared and tried to do his damnedest to help his family and friends and his country.
Jerry, it's been great to talk to you. It's been seven hours of interviews, and I so
7 hours.
7 hours.
What are you going to do? Are you